In this episode of the Locked On NBA Big Board podcast, it is another full scouting report episode. I've done one on Cooper Flagg, Ace Bailey. I do it on Dylan Harper. And as promised, I promised this before I went on a trip to Africa. This episode is about Nolan Traore, the French prospect that a lot of people think could be the key to their Olympic success down the line. Some are saying he is the best French point guard since Tony Parker. I got my brother James here, and James is going to share his opinion on Nolan Traore. I think he likes him, or maybe he doesn't. I don't know. We'll find out James's thoughts on Nolan Traore. Stay tuned. Big shout out to each and every person that has made the Locked On NBA Big Board podcast your first listen of the day. I'm your host, Rafael Barlowe, the director of scouting for NBA Big Board. And like I mentioned in the open, my brother James is my co-host for today. But before we get into this episode, I want to let you know that it is brought to you by GameTime. Download the GameTime app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNBA. You can get $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Download the GameTime app. What time is it? Game time. All right, let's just get right down to business. As DJ Quick said, let's get down to business. Nolan Traore. What are your thoughts on Traore?
Like him a whole lot.
Okay.
Number two.
Number two.
Yes.
He's the number 2 player on your early season unofficial big board.
He is the number 2 player on my big board that does not exist, that is in my head, that is being formulated day by day. He's number 2.
All right. I need to hear why. Why is he number 2?
Hey, man, listen to me. Why not? Size, speed, playmaking, checks all of those boxes.
Okay.
Right? The listen, at 6'4", 6'5". I've seen, 6'3". I mean, depends on when you look at it.
Yeah.
Depends on when you looked at it. Okay, let's say he's 6. Even if he's 6'3", that's still very good size for a point guard. That first step is as good as we've seen from anybody, and like he can pass. I don't think he's he's great at making downhill reads, right? So with his athleticism and his size and his speed, he comes off as somebody who's going to be able to put pressure on the rim. You get to the foul line. You saw he had that 44-point game. Adidas Next Generation.
45.
45.
Don't short him a point.
My
45.
fault. I saw 44 on Synergy. Maybe they shorted him a point, but there's a lot of free throws. He gets to the rim. He's going to put pressure on the rim. I think his jump shot is going to be perfectly fine. I don't see how he's not number 2 on anybody's board, to be honest with you.
Okay, so you like him over Ace Bailey and Dylan Harper, obviously?
Yeah, for sure. And, I like him over them too, for sure.
So I have a good friend of mine that is an NBA assistant coach, and he wants his team to tank. And so he's already started watching the draft. I mean, this was like, I talked to him probably, I don't know.
He's a fan of Traore?
He's a fan of Traore. The fact that he was watching ANGTs this summer, and he's just saying, I hope our team is in position to draft him. I was like, I mean, we usually talk about NBA stuff, just as friends shooting the breeze. But when he started bringing up the 45-point game against Barcelona and the ANGT, I was like, what do you know about Nolan Traore? He was like, hey, man, scoring 45 in a European setting is incredible. He likes him a lot, but he's hoping his team will be in position to draft him, and he feels like they need to make some trades to dump some guys to be in position.
You know who you're talking about, too. Listen to me. This could be like, and I'm not saying they are the same kind of draft, but this could be like Zion and Morant, and when you get Flagg and Traore. Like, you're gonna get like 2 high level players at 1 and at 2.
So this
stamping it, dog.
Take is going to be controversial simply because there's a lot of people that like Ace Bailey. There's some people that think Ace Bailey could be the number 1 pick. And then, I mean,
I'm
this
not some
just
people in
this
that
I know
situation.
you're not some people. But there are a lot of people that I've had this conversation with that feel like French prospects are being overvalued because of Victor Wembanyama, and they're naming like, and of course people do this all the time. They're naming like all the French failures and so
Listen to
on.
me. Can I address that? Listen to me. Let's bring it up. Frank Ntilikina. I was not a fan of Frank Ntilikina. You were there, right? He had no. He was a system point guard, run the offense, no change of pace, no boogie, none of that stuff, right?
East and
I
West. That's all
East and
he could do.
West.
East and West.
He was just tall, right? And he could run the offense. And guess what? He's a 3-and-D guy. Was not a fan. Killian Hayes.
I was a fan.
You were a fan. I was kind of a fan.
I was
Uh,
sold. I was sold on Kill.
Listen, the right hand did not exist on film, still doesn't exist, and it was a lot of tough shots. Now, can somewhere down the line Killian Hayes figure it out like 20, like on a not that he was hurt, but you know how like Dante Exum came back around and figured it out? I think Killian Hayes could do that. But right now, his confidence, all that stuff is not in a good place, basketball standpoint. Maybe he comes back. Traore is not Killian Hayes. And I'm not riding the French wave. Me and you, we had this argument off camera. It was like 2 hours after we did a podcast. Americans, we're still better. You want to tweet me about it? That's fine. We're still better. But Traore is legit. And like you saw at the Hoop Summit, he was the best player on the floor by far. Like that speed, that first step checks out. Like he's the goods. I think he is like clearly the number 2 pick today in September. But the draft isn't in September. But yes.
Yeah, I mean, he's had some pretty good preseason games. I pronounce it San Quentin. Anybody who has ever been to France knows that how a word is spelled phonetically or sounds phonetically in English is absolute means absolutely nothing in French. I can't pronounce it in French, but I know it looks like San Quentin, but
That's
I've
what
been
Pac
there.
would say.
Yeah, that's the prison in like California. But I've been there and I still can't pronounce how it's spelled. But anyway, he's had some pretty good preseason games there. I don't have the numbers in front of me. I know it is preseason, but I
He's
wanted
had a double
to.
double in like 10 minutes in preseason.
Yeah, no, I mean he's had some really good preseason games, and I know you talked about the Hoop Summit. He had 18 points. He was 8 of 14 from the floor, 2 of 4 from three, which is important. 2 of 4 from three. He had 4 assists, 2 rebounds. I remember I was at the game. I don't think you were a believer until
Man, and that's the
halfway through
thing.
the game.
Exactly, because remember we went to Basketball Without Borders and he was just I.
That's true. I do have in my notes from Basketball Without Borders. I was like, he's just too cool, like too cool for school. Like he wasn't. And I just talked about Will Riley on a previous podcast came out earlier today. Will Riley came to Basketball Without Borders like, hey, I know it's NBA scouts here. I
Yeah.
got to show improve. Traore had like the total opposite like demeanor coming into it. I mean, I didn't see him have much of an impact at all. And I was kind of high on him before that. I was off of him. And then I don't know what happened after he left Indianapolis and he had like, I mean, just an incredible showing at the Adidas Next Generation Tournament. Averaged 24.8 points, 3.5 rebounds, 6.5 assists, 1.5 steals. But I want to talk about this in the second segment. At the U18s, the numbers dropped down to 14 points, 9.3 assists, which led the tournament in assists, but he averaged 4.7 turnovers. And then I want to talk about any concerns you have with his shooting. So before we get into the second segment, let's talk about GameTime. Why? Because GameTime is my favorite app when it comes to purchasing tickets to sporting events, but it's not just sporting events. There's concerts, there's comedies, there's theaters. I love the fact that they have all-in pricing, toggling this feature. It shows you the total upfront, so there are no surprise fees at checkout. Anyone who's bought tickets knows when you buy a ticket, the price listed is not the same as soon as you get to the checkout. And with GameTime, you know exactly what the cost is. You get a panoramic view of the seat in the app before you buy. They have the lowest price guarantee. If it's not the lowest price, GameTime will credit you 110% of the difference. And they have the best ticket, or at least the most flexible customer service policy in the ticketing industry. So all you have to do is download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code Locked On NBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, use the redeem code LOCKEDON NBA for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Not now, but right now. And thank you for making the Locked On NBA Big Board podcast your first listen of the day. For your second listen, you got to check out the Locked On NBA podcast because there's no offseason in the NBA, and Locked On NBA provides daily basketball analysis from national and local experts, and you get it in 30 minutes or less. No one keeps you as formed and as entertained as Locked On NBA. It's available on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. It's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every single day. All right, at the end of the first segment, I talked a little bit about Traore, his dip in production from the Adidas Next Generation Tournament to the FIBA U18s. France finished 6-1, but it was only good for fifth place, which even though 6-1 is good, to me, it's still disappointing when you have two guys in Traore and Noah Singh who, you know, are possibly two lottery picks, but that's not too uncommon because last summer, France had Zachary Reese-Shea and Alex Sarr, guys who went 1 and 2 in the draft, and both of those guys didn't even average like 8 points a game each. And so, how to evaluate and judge French players in international competitions can be a little difficult because last year Melvin Ajinça was the team's leading scorer at I think it was the U19s, and he was like a late second round pick, and he's playing for Asvel this year. But anyway, Traore, what were your thoughts about the dip in production, even though he led the tournament in assists?
So like this, yes, he averaged 4.7 turnovers. That's crazy, but it was still a 2-to-1 assist to turnover ratio.
You know what? But
And
before you get into that, somebody had reached out, and I talked about this before. Someone reached out to me about why wasn't he on the Olympic team, and then I said, you know, maybe there's some concerns about the decision making and the turnovers, and then I mentioned like the 9.3, 4.7, and this is a Mavs fan. He was like, okay, so he had Luka Doncic assist to turnover numbers. Why
so
isn't
he
he on the team?
so he had Caitlin Clark assist to turnover ratio, like a high turnover guy who can. If you're gonna be two, I'll take 2-to-1. 2-to-1 is you can live with that. You want to be 2.5-to-1. I think his biggest issue with the turnovers is that his middle game still needs work. If he can get downhill, he's gonna get a layup. But sometimes, in particular at the under 18s, he was like stuck between trying to lock in on the roll man and not shooting a like in my notes, he needs a floater. Right now, it's just either I'm getting all the way to the rim or I'm gonna shoot the three. And analytics and all that's fine, but as a point guard, you need like a floater or to be able to get into your pull-up game. And in particular, going right. When he goes right, because he wants to go right, and you really can't stop him from going right, like Tony Parker. When he gets to his right hand, he's getting to the basket every single time. And if he's not getting to the basket, he's trying to hit the roll man. And that's where a lot of his turnovers happen. When he goes left, then you're more likely to see him shoot the shot that you get and drop coverage. So he's got to figure out what he wants to do going right. But I don't have an issue. The number was high, but he's a good enough playmaker for you to be like, he just had a bad tournament. He didn't have a great tournament making plays. And again, 9 assists a game, I'll take it. But at the same time, we do need to look at those assists because in FIBA, you do get an assist if your man gets fouled. So I need to see how many of those are I don't know what the term
Singing,
is.
because Noah gets fouled a
Live
lot.
assists. Yeah. So that's a legit concern. That's my main concern with him is that he's just got to be more decisive when he doesn't have a full head of steam in the pick and roll in the half court.
All right, let's talk about finishing at the rim. He's not an elite finisher. He's elite at getting to the rim, but I
Mm-hmm.
don't think he's an elite finisher. He's a prospect to where if you're one of these people that uses numbers first, eye test second, you're probably going to wonder why is he so highly touted because he's not the most efficient. He's a scorer, but he's not a shooter. He's a shot maker, but he's
Mm-hmm.
not always the most efficient from the floor. The numbers aren't bad by any means. And then, you figure he's 18 years old, so the numbers can only get better. But he's not necessarily elite at any category as far as scoring. And then for a guy that can get to the rim whenever he wants to and has this incredible first step, he's not like a crazy efficient finisher. Any concerns about the numbers?
Well, again, part of the finishing is just knowing what kind of when to take the floater. Like you can get too deep, and I don't want anybody to confuse me saying this could be like how Zion and John Morant, and I'm not comparing Traore to John Morant. John Morant has a playing 42-inch vertical where if he gets a foot in the paint, he can dunk the ball.
He's got a
But he
launching
also
pad.
he has a launching, but he also has a great floater. So that move that he
Mhm.
gets downhill could either be a dunk if he gets one more dribble, or it could be a floater. Traore doesn't shoot floaters. So your at the rim numbers aren't going to be as good when you're constantly trying to get to your right hand and teams are going to try to figure out. But again, he's only 18. So like you'll take it. There's room for growth there, but like I think he's gonna be fine as far as just like finishing at the rim. The FIBA game, again, some of the calls you get in America, you don't get in the FIBA game. So there's gonna be opportunities for him to get to the foul line more. And again, evidenced by that 45-point game, he shot like 16, 18 free throws that game. So like I think he's gonna be fine. He just has to add some stuff. And it's like if we're gonna sit here and say, man, I'm worried about him getting to the rim. I mean, Dylan Harper isn't the most fleet of foot guy, so his stuff is going to have to be calculated too. So it's
But,
like
with,
I'm
with
not.
Dylan Harper, I've seen him make some plays above the rim if he has like a launching pad.
Yeah, but I mean, it's hard to get a launching pad,
Yeah.
and he doesn't have the. He's not the quickest guy anyway, so it's like,
No.
how often is he going to get that launching pad at the next level? Now, again, I know he's crafty, I know he's talented. This is not the Dylan Harper podcast, but like, I'm just not. Traore needs to improve, but like, he can get there, and I think he's going to be fine.
Oh, he
And
can
he's going to
definitely.
be at the rim,
He
not
can
necessarily
definitely
below the
get.
rim. He's going to be an
And
at the rim all the time guy.
now, he may look better with NBA spacing if you got a stretch four out there or a stretch five or even a five setting the screen with spacing. He may be fine. Let's talk about his shooting. Like over, if you look at like the next generation tournaments and his time last year with, and I know I'm pronouncing it wrong, San Quentin, and then just overall
What's the
like the
first
last year.
song that you think of when you hear "Saying Quitting" from Pac?
Man, I haven't listened to Tupac in a long time,
Man,
so
you
I
put me on the Pac, man. Come
I
on now.
know, but I mean I haven't listened to Pac in a long time. But anyway. 34% from three, 73% from the line over the past year. Not bad numbers, not elite by any means. I will say that 34% from three is,
Take that.
yeah, I'll take that. One, because he's taken a lot of threes. I shouldn't say a lot, but he does take a fair share amount of his threes off the dribble. A lot of them are self-created threes, but the 73% from the foul line. If you're a believer that free throw percentage is indicative of shooting touch, how do you like what are your thoughts on that, I should say?
I'll take 73% from the foul line for a
For a
guy.
point guard?
Yeah.
No, I
At
would
this
want
age, I'll take that.
better.
I want better, but it's not like it's not 60s. 60s is where you get in trouble, right? So what's John Moran at the free throw line? I can't think of it off the top of my head. I know, and I'm not comparing the two or even the three, but John Wall at the free throw line was like 75%.
Yeah.
So it's like 73, you'll take it. It's the jump shot looks good, the touch looks good. form, everything looks good. I'll take 70% from an 18-year-old. Now, if my point guard was in the 60s, we'd have an issue. Is he Reed Shepherd? No. Who's been Reed Shepherd lately? Is he my man Rob Dilly from the foul line? No, but those are like great shooters at that same age level. I don't think Traore is a great shooter, but I think he has the potential to be a good shooter. But then again, when you couple it with the speed and the athleticism and just the rim pressure, like I think he's gonna be fine.
All right, that makes sense. All right, when we return, we're gonna dig a little deeper into Traore's strengths, and then we're gonna talk about some potential issues and maybe some teams that he will be a good fit for. But before we get into the last segment, let's talk about FanDuel because you've heard us talk about FanDuel a lot. FanDuel is America's #1 sports book, and FanDuel has something a little different for you. Now through September 22nd, so you got 12 days, all FanDuel customers can bet $5, just $5. You can get a 3-week free trial of the NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. And then with a YouTube TV base plan, you'll be able to watch every regular season Sunday afternoon out of market game. And all you need is a Google account and a current form of payment. You can cancel anytime. So just visit fanduel.com and download America's #1 sports book. All right, last segment. When you look at Traore's film or when you watch him, we've talked about the speed and the ability to get to the rim. We've talked about the passing. What are some other strengths that you see that make you so high on him?
I think that him being a relentless like driver, yes, that's a strength. Like he's gonna get to his spot, which means he's gonna come off that pick going right, and he's gonna find a way to get to the basket. And I think he's a good enough playmaker. Again, is he Luka? No. Is he Trae Young? No. But you pair him with a rolling five or a pop five, he can make those reads. He just needs to get better. He just needs more reps. I feel like he would have had a perfect opportunity to do that in the Olympics, but I mean, that's just me. But like, yeah, I'm buying, and it's potential. Again, the last segment we talked about the free throw percentage and the shooting. What kind of shooter is he? Not saying he's the same player, but coming out of Kentucky, what was Tyrese Maxey's concerns? What kind of shooter is he? He shot 80% from the foul line. He shot 30%, 29% from the 3-point line. So it's kind of like, and he
And there were
fell.
concerns about the release point being low.
Exactly. But you
And
weren't concerned
what
about the
position does he
speed.
play? Yeah.
Yeah. But you weren't concerned about the speed and you weren't concerned about the athleticism as far as getting to the basket. Now, they're not, I think Traore is going to be more of a passer than Tyrese. I'm a big Tyrese fan. I don't know if I told you this, but that's the new Tony. That's the modern version of what Tony Parker looks like. We can't stop him and he can get to the bat and he's shooting threes where Tony was shooting those mid-range jumpers. But
There
I
would never be another Tony Parker. That dude was finishing like 70% at the rim, challenging Shaq. And shout out to Logan Adams. He did an article that I read. Again, if you're not supporting some of these young draft writers, man, there's a lot of talented writers in the space. Logan Adams did a article about Traore and the Tony Parker comparisons, and he said something that I've only heard NBA players say to me. And he talked about Tony Parker had like incredible core strength. Remember, we used to hear
yeah.
guys talk about how Tony Parker's core and Ginobili. Like, I had a friend that played against them, and he just said like their core strength was so strong that it didn't matter who was in the paint, and they were able to contort their bodies and finish at high percentages because it was all core strength. While they didn't look necessarily strong, and he broke down that about, and Logan broke down Tony Parker's core strength and how Traore needs to like improve
Yes.
his core strength that would help him be a better finisher.
But I
Anyway,
think
there's
Tyrese
no Tony Parkers.
No, but I think Tyrese has that level of core strength as far as like finishing. Because if Tyrese gets to that, if he gets off his right foot, he's going to make that layup basically every single
Yeah.
time. But
Tyrese has his a different level of burst. Like this guy, like when I see Traore, I see like first step, like first step. Tyrese is like a burst where it's like he just gets shot out of a cannon, but it's so controlled.
Yeah,
Tyrese is just different.
I think Tyrese is if we grade him, Tyrese has the max first step burst. Traore is probably a step underneath. Now, to bring this all together, and again, we're not comparing Tyrese and Traore, but does my biggest concern outside of sometimes the decision making is does Traore have what Tyrese has, Maxi, to beat switches, right? Because again, we've seen the French and the international point guards outside of like Luca. You switch a guy on them, and I gotta come off the ball. Does Traore have enough to where he can beat a switch? Because if we're gonna sit here and say we can't stop him from getting to the paint, we're gonna back off of him, test the jump shot out. Does he have enough one-on-one boogie to beat switches consistently? And that's something I'm going to be looking forward to, seeing if he has that at San Quentin this next year.
Yeah, I mean, we haven't seen any French guards have that period.
I mean, but Tony Parker had that little carry Stephon Marbury crossover to beat
Yeah,
you. I
I
mean, it
mean,
isn't.
Tony,
I'm not
Tony,
saying you got to
Tony
go
was
out there and
different.
pat the rock crazy, but you
Yeah,
need
just
something where you got to
creativity.
beat a guy. You need to have some creativity. I
Yeah.
think Traore has some of it, but it'll be interesting to see how often he does it because he's going to be a guy that just needs to back up and then go for it right at you, and he's going to win that matchup every single time, or at least most times. But the times where you got a guy who can defend on the perimeter, what is he going to do with that? Or when they say, we're going to put our small forward on you, can you beat this guy without a screen? Or he's not gonna die on the screen. What are you gonna do with that?
Yeah, I think he has like some step backs in his arsenal. You got to respect the speed, and I think when you have someone that has a first step as dynamic as his, because you got to respect that speed. I think that he's shown flashes of having that rhythm pull up jumper. He does need to add a floater, like you said, and then as far as passing, at the minimum, he has the ability to draw to and find an open man. And to me, that's what the
Man,
NBA is
that's
all about.
all.
Can you
When
get
you're
in the paint,
that
draw help?
fast,
Yeah.
yeah. When you're that fast, and with his size, man, you don't have to have the cone vision of Peyton Manning on whatever year Madden was. You just need to be able to beat the guy in front of you when they help, throw a lob, hit the guy in the corner, run an offense. Like you don't have to. He doesn't have to be a high assist guy for him to be worth the number 2 pick and be a potential All Star.
All right. Now let's talk about some potential teams. So if he's the number 2 pick, like you're saying, the teams that I expect to be in that range, Brooklyn, good fit.
Yes, do it.
The Wizards, I mean, you might as well change them to a French team if they
Les Wizards.
yeah. The Pistons, ah,
Why not?
uh,
Man, look, I don't care, man. Listen, man, Detroit, you're not in position to draft
and
on
you can't
fit,
just
man.
keep taking guards on top of
Yo, well, you
top
can't
of
keep taking bigs. I mean, what's going
yeah, I don't
on?
know
You
what's
can't
going
keep
on.
taking non-shooters. You
Utah,
gotta, yeah, do it. What we waiting for? Show
uh,
me the French restaurants in Salt Lake City, man.
Charlotte. Do you think this is a year where Charlotte's like, all right, this LaMelo experience? I mean, it's a new front office, new coaching staff. It's all new. We don't know what they're going to do, but Charlotte could be an interesting place.
That could be interesting.
Portland, Chicago.
Chicago, do it. Come on, man. We wasting our. I like Kobe White,
What's
but
that?
I said
Oh,
I
you like
like
Kobe
Kobe
White?
White, but I mean
Toronto and San Antonio.
San
Out of all those
Antonio.
teams, I'll name them again: Brooklyn, Washington, Detroit, Utah, Charlotte, Portland, Chicago, Toronto, San Antonio. Those are teams that I expect to be in the lottery. Which is your best choice? And San Antonio has 2 chances to be in the lottery if the Hawks don't make it because they got the Hawks pick.
Brooklyn is the best option.
Yeah, that
Or
cupboard
that
is
cupboard is
clear.
bare.
Yeah.
And the one piece that they had, they looked at the draft and was like, "Yeah, yo, we'll send him. He wouldn't even have to change addresses. We're keeping bridges in New York City, so Brooklyn is a no brainer. I mean, I don't think it's if it's the Wizards, I'm doing it. I mean, like, why not? So, like I said, I like him. I think he's the second best player in this draft right now. Again, things are going to change. Things could change, but if you ask me today, taking him number 2. If that's Brooklyn, we high-fiving each other in the war room. Like, hey, we didn't get flagged, but we got a guy who has a lot of talent. So
That'd be tough. Ace Bailey is in the area. Dylan Harper's in the
when
area.
is that? When do you invite me to the Ace Bailey podcast?
I did a solo one, but
when do you invite me to the Ace Bailey podcast?
We can do another one.
All
Clearly,
right.
you got some stuff you need to get off your chest. All right. Last question. And this is a question I'll ask because it's like a general question that NBA teams ask their scouts. All right. If Nolan Traore is not a lottery pick this year, what happened?
He got hurt. I'm not wishing that on anybody.
All right. Outside of an injury, if he's not a lottery pick, what happened? What concerns or red flags came to light?
The turnover issue is not a blip, and the jump shot has to be terrible. It has to be a combination of both for him to not be a lottery pick. I think if he turns the ball over a lot, but the jump shot continues to progress, then you just be like, all right, man, we got to figure out these turnovers. I feel like if the turnovers go down and the jump shot isn't great, we'll figure out the jump shot. Like, it's going to have to be a combination of those two things for him to fall out of the lottery, in my opinion.
That's fair. Well, that wraps up this episode of the Locked On NBA Big Board Podcast. James and I, we did a full episode on Francis Nolan Traore. A lot of guys think that he is the best French point guard since Tony Parker. Then there's some that say, well, that ain't saying much. Either way, Nolan Traore is a guy that I'm really high on. I think that he's a top 5 pick. I can't go with number 2. I think I'm gonna go with Ace Bailey over him right now. But anyway,
when is the Ace Bailey podcast?
Man, we'll give you your Ace Bailey. I don't even want to. I mean, we'll let you get that off your chest. Once again, thank you for making the Locked On NBA Big Board Podcast your first listen of the day. Now go check out the Locked On NBA Podcast, where the season never ends and you get a national and local perspective. You can find the link on Locked On NBA in the description, so you don't have to search. It's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Once again, it's Rafael Barlowe with my brother James Barlowe. This is the Nolan Traore episode. And yes, James, you're going to get your Ace Bailey red flag episode soon, but the next episode, me and James are going to talk about a guy that I know is one of James's favorite players in the world, because he's been talking about this guy for years, way before everybody was talking about him. Trey Johnson from Texas, a guy that I think it could be feast or famine for him. It's all about how he's used at Texas, so you don't want to miss that episode. Once again, it's Rafael and James, and we are